They say the person you marry is not the same person you divorce. But for Adrian Blackwood, the divorce wasn't just an end. It was supposed to be his greatest victory. He sat across the mahogany table, pen in hand, signing his marriage away while laughing in his wife's face. He thought he had won. He thought he had stripped her of every penny, securing his life with his young mistress. But Adrian forgot one thing. Timing is everything. He didn't know that a single signature, scribbled in arrogance, would trigger a clause in a dying man's will that would cost him not just millions, but his entire existence. This is the story of how a man's greed became his own executioner. The conference room at Sterling and Associates smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. Specifically, the oud wood scent that Adrian Blackwood had been wearing for the last 6 months. It was a scent Emily Blackwood had come to associate with late nights, missed dinners, and the phantom perfume of another woman. Emily sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple charcoal blouse, her face pale but composed. Across from her, Adrian looked like he had just won the lottery. He was leaning back in the plush leather chair, twirling a Mont Blanc fountain pen between his fingers. "Come on, Emily," Adrian said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "Don't look so tragic. You knew this was coming. We haven't been us since I realized I deserved better." Mr. Archibald Sterling, the family attorney who had served the Blackwoods for 3 decades, adjusted his spectacles. He looked uncomfortable. He had known Emily since she was a child, and watching this dismantling of her life was clearly distasteful to him. "Mr. Blackwood," Sterling said, his voice stiff, "are you absolutely certain you wish to waive the cooling-off period? Once you sign these papers, given the pre-nuptial amendments you negotiated last month, the dissolution is immediate and binding. There is no going back." Adrian laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that bounced off the glass walls overlooking the London skyline. "Sterling, you old bat, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want this done today, before noon. I have a lunch reservation at the Shard that I don't intend to miss." Emily finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried a steeliness that Adrian was too arrogant to notice. "You're really doing this, Adrian? After 15 years? You're leaving me with nothing but the house in Surrey?" "The house in Surrey is a money pit, darling," Adrian sneered, leaning forward. "But yes, that's the deal. You sign, you get the house, and you keep your dignity. You fight me, and I'll bury you in legal fees until you're sleeping in a cardboard box under Waterloo Bridge. I have the best lawyers in the city. You have nothing." He wasn't lying about the lawyers. Adrian had ruthlessly maneuvered their finances over the last 2 years. He had hidden assets in offshore accounts in the Caymans under shell companies like Obsidian Holdings and Red Lion Ventures. He had transferred the deed to their primary estate to a trust controlled by his business partner, who was actually his brother, Julian Blackwood. On paper, Adrian was almost destitute, making the alimony calculations laughably low. In reality, he was sitting on a hidden empire. Emily looked at the papers. The divorce decree. Irreconcilable differences. "I'll sign," Emily said. Adrian slapped the table triumphantly. "That's a good girl." Mr. Sterling pushed the heavy document toward Adrian first. "Sign here, and initial the bottom of page 42. Adrian signed with a flourish. His signature was large, aggressive, taking up more space than the line allowed. As he wrote, he couldn't help but twist the knife one last time. "You know, Emily, Tiffany is already picking out curtains for the penthouse. She has such vibrant taste." unlike you. You always were so beige. Emily didn't flinch at the mention of the mistress's name. She took the pen Mr. Sterling offered her. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a suppressed rage that threatened to boil over. She signed her name, Emily Elizabeth Blackwood. "Effective immediately," Adrian declared, checking his Rolex. 11:15 a.m. I am a free man." He stood up, buttoning his tailored Italian suit jacket. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't say goodbye. He simply turned to Mr. Sterling. "File it within the hour, Archibald. I want the confirmation email before my appetizers arrive." "As you wish," Sterling said coldly. Adrian walked out of the conference room, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind him. His laughter echoed down the hallway, fading into the hum of the elevator. Emily sat in silence for a long moment. "Emily," Mr. Sterling said softly, taking off his glasses. "I am truly sorry. If you had let me fight him—" "No, Archibald," Emily said, raising her head. Her eyes were dry. "He needed to think he won. He needed to be absolutely sure he was divorced today. It was necessary." Sterling looked confused. "Necessary? He's left you with a mortgaged property and barely enough savings to last a year. How is this necessary?" Emily stood up, smoothing her skirt. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below, watching the tiny car that was Adrian's limousine pull into traffic. "Because," Emily said, her voice dropping to a chill whisper, "Grandfather Silas is dying. The nurse called me at 10:30 a.m. He has maybe 4 hours left." Sterling's eyes widened. "Silas Vance? But his will—" "Exactly," Emily said, turning back to the lawyer. "Adrian was so busy hiding his own money, he never bothered to read the updates to my family's estate planning. He thinks he signed away a wife. He has no idea he just signed away his eligibility for the Vance fortune." Adrian Blackwood felt lighter than air. He stepped out of the elevator at the Shangri-La Hotel and strutted toward the table by the window where Tiffany was waiting. Tiffany was 23, stunningly beautiful, and entirely expensive. She was scrolling through Instagram on her phone, her manicured nails tapping against the screen. When she saw Adrian, she lit up, or at least the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she waved. "Baby!" she squealed, drawing the attention of several businessmen at nearby tables. Adrian slid into the booth and kissed her deeply, savoring the taste of victory. "It's done," he announced, signaling the waiter. "Bring us the Dom Perignon, the 2008 vintage." "You actually did it?" Tiffany asked, her eyes widening. "She signed? No fight?" "She knows when she's beaten," Adrian bragged. "I told you, Tiff. Emily is weak. She's old-fashioned. She thinks suffering in silence is a virtue. I left her the Surrey house just to keep her quiet. It needs a new roof and the plumbing is shot. She'll be bankrupt within 6 months trying to maintain it." Tiffany giggled, sipping her water. "You're so bad, Adrian. I love it." Adrian's phone buzzed. It was a text from his brother, Julian. Message. "Papers filed," Adrian typed back. "Signed, sealed, delivered. We are in the clear. Transfer the assets back to the main account on Monday." He put the phone down, feeling the rush of adrenaline. He had pulled off the perfect heist. He had legally divorced his wife while his assets were hidden, meaning she got no settlement. Now he would bring the money back, marry Tiffany, and live like a king. "So," Tiffany said, tracing the rim of her glass, "when can we start planning the wedding? I saw this venue in Lake Como." "Soon, babe, soon," Adrian said, distracted by the arrival of the champagne. The waiter popped the cork with a soft hiss. "To freedom," Adrian toasted. "To us," Tiffany smiled. As they drank, Adrian's mind drifted to his business, Blackwood Logistics. Truthfully, the company was in trouble. He had leveraged it heavily to fund this lifestyle and to hide assets from Emily. He was counting on a sudden influx of cash to stabilize the books before the auditors came next month. He wasn't worried, though. He had a backup plan. Or rather, an expectation. Emily's uncle, Silas Vance, was the tycoon behind Vance Shipping, a maritime giant worth nearly £500 million. Silas was old, sick, and had no children of his own. Adrian had spent the last 10 years enduring boring Sunday dinners, pretending to listen to the old man's war stories, and playing the role of the devoted nephew-in-law. Adrian knew Silas was traditional. He valued family above all else. In his last conversation with Silas, the old man had grasped Adrian's hand and said, "You take care of my Emily, Adrian. You're the man of the house now. I'm leaving the legacy to those who hold the family together." Adrian interpreted this as, "I am leaving the money to you and Emily." Now that he was divorced, he figured it didn't matter. He was the one running a logistics company. He was the one with the business acumen. Emily was a housewife who painted watercolors. Surely Silas would leave the business assets to him, or at least a significant chunk. And even if the money went to Emily, Adrian felt he could bully her into giving him a share, or perhaps he had already siphoned enough from the joint accounts that he didn't need it. But deep down, Adrian was banking on Silas dying before he found out about the divorce. "What are you thinking about?" Tiffany asked, pouting slightly. "You're frowning." "Just business," Adrian said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about the future." His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It was Emily. He groaned. "She's calling already. Probably can't find the boiler switch." "Don't answer it," Tiffany said. "You're divorced. Not your problem." Adrian smirked and silenced the call. "You're right. Not my problem." The phone rang again immediately. This time he looked at it with annoyance. He picked it up. "What, Emily? I told you. Contact my lawyer if—" "Adrian," Emily's voice was calm, devoid of the emotion he expected. "I'm calling to inform you. Uncle Silas died 20 minutes ago." The restaurant noise seemed to fade away. Adrian sat up straighter. "Silas, he's gone?" "Yes. The heart failure finally took him." Adrian's mind raced. 20 minutes ago. It was currently 1 p.m. He had signed the divorce papers at 11:15 a.m. "Well," Adrian said, trying to sound solemn, but his brain calculating the odds. "That is tragic. He was a great man." "The funeral is in 3 days," Emily said. "The reading of the will is on Friday. Mr. Sterling says everyone named in the will must attend." "Everyone named?" Adrian asked, his heart skipping a beat. Did he mention me?" "I don't know the contents of the will, Adrian," Emily lied smoothly. "But you were his nephew-in-law for 15 years. You should probably be there." "Of course," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a respectful register. "I'll be there. For the family." "Right," Emily said. "For the family." She hung up. Adrian set the phone down, a slow smile spreading across his face again. Silas was dead. The old man hadn't known about the divorce. It had happened too fast. To Silas Vance, Adrian was still the devoted husband. "Good news?" Tiffany asked. "Sad news, actually," Adrian said, though his eyes were gleaming with greed. "Rich Uncle Silas just kicked the bucket." "Oh no," Tiffany said, sounding bored. "Does that mean we have to go to a funeral?" "It means," Adrian said, grabbing the champagne bottle and refilling his glass to the brim, "that we are about to be richer than God. He had no kids. It's all going to Emily. And since he didn't know we were divorced, I bet there's a massive bequest for me personally. The old fool loved me." He raised his glass, to Uncle Silas. May he rest in peace, and may his bank account rest in mine." He laughed, the sound loud and obnoxious. He had no idea that at that very moment Mr. Sterling was sitting in his office, looking at the timestamp on the divorce filing, 11:45 a.m., and then looking at the timestamp on Silas Vance's death certificate, which the doctor had just called in, 12:50 p.m. Technically, Adrian was divorced before Silas died, and Mr. Sterling opened the heavy leather binder containing Silas Vance's last will and testament. He turned to Article 9, Section C. He read the words written there, and a small, dry smile touched his lips. "Mr. Blackwood," the lawyer whispered to the empty room, "you really should have read the fine print." The funeral of Silas Vance was the social event of the season, a grim paradox of grief and networking. It was held at St. Paul's Cathedral, a testament to the old man's influence in the city. The pews were filled with shipping magnates, politicians, and the old money elite of London, people who wore suits older than Adrian and had bank accounts that never saw the light of day. Adrian Blackwood arrived 20 minutes late. He didn't come alone, despite the frantic text messages from his brother Julian warning him against it. Adrian stepped out of his black Aston Martin with Tiffany on his arm. Tiffany was wearing a black dress, but it was entirely wrong for the occasion. It was a cocktail dress, tight-fitting with a neckline that plunged aggressively. She wore oversized sunglasses and a fascinator that looked more suited for the Royal Ascot races than a solemn requiem. "Adrian," Julian hissed, intercepting them at the stone steps of the cathedral. Julian looked pale. He was the quieter, smarter brother, the one who actually managed the logistics of their schemes while Adrian played the front man. "Are you insane? You brought her?" "Today?" "Relax, Julian," Adrian said, adjusting his tie. "I'm a grieving nephew-in-law. I need support. Besides, Silas is dead. He doesn't care who I'm sleeping with anymore. And Emily, well, Emily needs to see that I've moved on. It's a power move." "It's suicide," Julian muttered, looking around nervously. "These people judge everything. If you want Silas's business contacts to trust you after the will is read, you can't look like a clown." "I look like a winner," Adrian corrected him. He took Tiffany's hand. "Come on, babe, let's go sit in the front row." Inside, the air was thick with incense and organ music. Adrian marched down the center aisle, ignoring the gasps and the turning heads. He spotted Emily sitting in the front pew, right next to the casket. She looked small, dressed in a modest black coat, her head bowed. She was flanked by Mr. Sterling and a few elderly relatives. Adrian maneuvered into the pew directly behind her. He made a show of sighing loudly, patting his chest as if overcome with emotion. "So sad," Tiffany whispered, though she was busy checking her reflection in her compact mirror. "Do you think there will be food after?" "Shh," Adrian said, leaning forward to tap Emily on the shoulder. Emily stiffened but didn't turn around. "Emily," Adrian whispered, his voice oozing fake sympathy. "I know this is hard. I just want you to know. I'm here for you. Even though we're, legally separated." He used the word separated intentionally, careful not to say divorced too loudly in front of the others. He still wanted to maintain the illusion of family unity until the check cleared. Emily turned slowly. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was piercing. She looked at Adrian, then shifted her eyes to Tiffany, who gave a little awkward wave. "Thank you, Adrian," Emily said, her voice ice-cold. "But the front pews are reserved for family. You are a guest." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I was his nephew for 15 years, Emily. Don't cause a scene. I'm not the one who brought a mistress to a funeral. Emily replied, turning back to the altar. Adrian sat back, fuming. He spent the rest of the service scanning the room, calculating the net worth of the attendees. He saw the CEO of Maersk, the head of Lloyd's of London, and several venture capitalists he had been trying to get meetings with for years. He mentally rehearsed his pitch. Yes, sad loss. I'll be taking over the helm of Vance Shipping now. We should do lunch. At the reception afterwards, held at the Vance estate, Adrian went into overdrive. He grabbed a glass of scotch and worked the room, leaving Tiffany by the chocolate fountain. He cornered Mr. Sterling near the fireplace. Archibald, Adrian said, clapping the lawyer on the back. Great service. Very touching. Listen, about the reading on Friday. Can you give me a hint? Just between us men. Sterling looked at Adrian with an expression of profound distaste. It is a standard reading, Mr. Blackwood. All assets will be distributed according to Mr. Vance's wishes. Right, Adrian winked. And the business? Vance Shipping? I assume he left the operational control to someone with experience? Emily can't run a shipping empire. She can barely run a bath. Sterling paused. He took a sip of his water, his eyes unreadable. Silas was a very observant man, Adrian. He made changes to his will quite recently. He wanted to ensure the company was in stable hands. Adrian grinned. Stable, that's me. Blackwood Logistics is booming. It wasn't, but Sterling didn't need to know that. I look forward to seeing you on Friday, Sterling said, excusing himself. Adrian watched him go, feeling a surge of triumph. Stable hands, that had to be him. Who else was there? Emily had no siblings. Her cousins were idiots. Adrian was the only logical heir to the throne. He walked over to Julian, who was hiding in the corner. It's in the bag, brother. Sterling basically confirmed it. We're getting the company. Julian didn't look convinced. I checked the court records, Adrian. The divorce was finalized at 11:45 a.m. Silas died at 12:50 p.m. That's a 1-hour window. If the will has a spousal provision... Stop worrying, Adrian laughed, downing his scotch. Silas wrote that will years ago. He probably left it to my niece Emily and her husband. That's me. I'm the husband mentioned. A piece of paper signed an hour before he died doesn't change 15 years of history. He looked across the room at Emily, who was accepting condolences from a line of mourners. She looked fragile, weak. She's going to be so lost without me, Adrian mused. Maybe I'll hire her as a consultant. Give her something to do. He laughed again, unaware that across the room Emily was watching him. She wasn't looking at him with longing. She was looking at him the way a demolition expert looks at a building 5 seconds before the plunger is pushed. Friday arrived with a grey, drizzling sky, fitting for the mood in Mr. Sterling's office. The library of the law firm was imposing, lined with books, bound in calfskin. The room was full. Emily sat in a high-backed chair near the desk. She wore a navy suit, sharp and professional. Adrian sat opposite her, flanked by Julian, for moral support, and Tiffany, who insisted on coming because she wanted to hear how much money we were getting. There were others. The housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, Silas's old gardener, a representative from a cat shelter, and 2 distant cousins who looked hopeful. Mr. Sterling sat at the head of the table. He placed a thick envelope on the mahogany surface. He broke the wax seal with a loud crack. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling began, his voice grave. We are here to execute the last will and testament of Silas Arthur Vance. This document was updated and notarized 3 months ago. Adrian sat up straighter. 3 months ago? That was fine. He and Emily were still married then. Sterling began with the small bequests. To Mrs. Higgins for 20 years of service, $500,000 and the cottage in Sussex. Mrs. Higgins sobbed into her handkerchief. To the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, $1,000. To my cousins Peter and Paul, $50,000 each. The cousins looked disappointed, but nodded. Adrian tapped his foot impatiently. Get to the good part. And now, Sterling said, looking over his spectacles, to the primary estate. This includes the liquid assets, the investment portfolio, the real estate portfolio, and the controlling shares of Vance Shipping International. Total estimated value, $480,000. Tiffany gasped audibly. Adrian gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. $500 million. It was more than he thought. Clause 7, Sterling read. Regarding my beloved niece, Emily Elizabeth Blackwood. Adrian held his breath. I have watched my niece grow into a strong, capable woman, Sterling read Silas's words. However, I have also watched her marriage. I have seen the shadows in her eyes. I have seen the disrespect shown to her by her husband, Adrian Blackwood. Adrian froze. The air left the room. Sterling continued reading, his voice steady. I have long suspected that Adrian is more in love with my money than with my niece. Therefore, the distribution of my estate is conditional, based on the status of their marriage at the exact moment of my death. Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. Conditional? Section A, Sterling read. If Emily and Adrian are still legally married at the time of my death, I hereby leave 100% of my estate to a blind trust managed by Mr. Archibald Sterling. Emily shall receive a monthly allowance of $5,000. Adrian Blackwood shall receive nothing. The control of Vance Shipping will be transferred to the board of directors. I will not allow my life's work to fund a man who does not respect my family. There was a stunned silence. Adrian's mouth fell open. If they had stayed married, he would have gotten nothing? He would have been locked out? However, Sterling said, raising his voice slightly to cut through the tension. Section B. He looked directly at Adrian. If, at the time of my death, Emily is legally divorced from Adrian Blackwood, I recognize that she has found the strength to stand on her own. In this event, I leave the entirety of my estate, the money, the properties, and the full controlling interest of Vance Shipping, solely and absolutely, to Emily Elizabeth Vance. She has proven she has the courage to cut out the rot in her life, and she is therefore worthy of the legacy. Adrian felt like he had been punched in the gut. Sterling set the paper down and picked up a separate document. I have here the official death certificate of Silas Vance. Time of death, 12:50 p.m., December 14th. He picked up another paper, and I have here the decree absolute, dissolving the marriage of Adrian and Emily Blackwood. Time of filing, 11:45 a.m., December 14th. Sterling smiled, a rare, genuine smile directed at Emily. By a margin of 1 hour and 5 minutes, the condition of Section B is met. Emily, you are the sole heir. You own everything. Vance Shipping is yours. The room erupted. Mrs. Higgins clapped. The cousins looked shocked. But Adrian sat paralyzed. The irony crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He had rushed the divorce. He had bullied Emily into signing that morning. He had laughed in her face. He had waived the cooling-off period because he wanted to secure his own hidden scraps of money and marry his mistress. If he had waited, if he had just waited one more day, or even just a few hours, the married clause would have triggered. Sure, he would have gotten nothing directly in that version either, Clause A. But at least Emily wouldn't have become a billionaire empress. He could have fought a trust. He could have manipulated a monthly allowance. But by divorcing her, he had handed her the keys to the kingdom. He had literally fulfilled the old man's requirement for her to get rich. "No," Adrian whispered. He stood up, his face turning purple. "No! That's a trick. That's fraud." "It is the law, Mr. Blackwood," Sterling said, closing the folder. "You were so eager to be free. Well, you are free. Free of the marriage, and free of the fortune." "I contested it," Adrian shouted, pointing at Emily. "I didn't know he was dying. She tricked me. She knew." Emily stood up slowly. She looked taller, stronger. She looked at Adrian with a calm, pitying expression. "I didn't trick you, Adrian," Emily said softly. "I asked you if you were sure. I asked you 3 times in that conference room. You laughed at me. You said you'd never been more certain." You, Adrian stammered, lunging toward the table. Julian grabbed him by the arm. "Adrian, stop, it's over, let's go." "It's not over," Adrian screamed, shaking his brother off. He turned to Tiffany, looking for support. Tiffany was staring at Emily. She was looking at the woman who was now worth £500 million. Then she looked at Adrian, the man who had just lost everything. Tiffany stood up. She picked up her designer purse. "Tiffany?" Adrian asked. "You said we were going to be rich," Tiffany said, her voice flat. "You said you were the smart one." "I am. I can fix this." "You're an idiot, Adrian," Tiffany said. She looked at Emily. "Congratulations, Mrs. Vance." Tiffany turned and walked out of the room. Adrian stood alone in the center of the library, the laughter from the divorce signing, now a haunting echo in his mind. He looked at Emily, really looked at her, and realized for the first time that he hadn't just lost the money. He had lost the game he didn't even know he was playing, but Adrian Blackwood was not a man who gave up easily. As the shock faded, a new emotion took over. Pure, unadulterated malice. "You think you've won?" Adrian snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just take my company? Vance Shipping relies on Blackwood Logistics for its supply chain. I'll ruin you, Emily. I'll burn the whole operation to the ground before I let you keep a penny." Emily smiled. It was a terrifying smile. For 3 days, the port of Felixstowe, the busiest container port in the United Kingdom, became a graveyard for Vance Shipping. Adrian Blackwood sat in his glass-walled office at Blackwood Logistics, watching the news reports on the flat-screen TV. The ticker at the bottom read, "Supply Chain Crisis. Vance Shipping Cargo Stranded." Adrian took a slow sip of his espresso. He looked terrible, unshaven, his eyes manic, but he felt a grim satisfaction. He had done exactly what he threatened. He had ordered his fleet to stop moving Vance containers. He cited contractual irregularities and safety concerns regarding the cargo. It was a lie, of course, but in the world of logistics, a lie could hold up a shipment for weeks, and weeks of delay meant millions in penalties for Emily. "She thought she could just take the money and run," Adrian muttered to Julian, who was pacing nervously by the window. "She forgot who moves the product. You can own the oil, but if you don't own the pipeline, you're nothing." Julian stopped pacing. "Adrian, this is dangerous. We have a contract with them, a strict service-level agreement. If we breach it like this, they can sue us for damages. We don't have the liquidity to fight a lawsuit. You spent the reserve cash on the penthouse deposit." "Let them sue!" Adrian shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. "By the time the lawyers get involved, her reputation will be trash. Clients like Amazon and Tesco need those goods now. They'll drop Vance Shipping and sign directly with us. This is a hostile takeover, Julian. We break her, then we buy the pieces of her company for pennies on the pound." His phone rang. It was the receptionist. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Vance is on line 1. Adrian grinned. She cracked. "Put her through." He picked up the phone, leaning back in his chair. Well, If it isn't the billionaire heiress. Calling to beg? Adrian. Emily's voice was calm, unsettlingly calm. I'm not calling to beg. I'm calling to give you one chance. Release the cargo. Get the trucks moving by noon today. Or what? Adrian laughed. You'll cry to your dead uncle? Listen to me, Emily. I want a new contract. I want 40% of Vance Shipping's annual revenue, and I want a seat on the board. You signed that, and the trucks move. You don't, and your company dies. There was a pause on the line. You really haven't been paying attention to the paperwork, have you, Adrian? Emily asked. What are you talking about? The contract between Vance Shipping and Blackwood Logistics, Emily said. It has a key man clause. But more importantly, it has a financial solvency clause. It states that if your logistics company falls below a certain credit rating, or if your debt-to-equity ratio becomes unstable, Vance Shipping has the right to terminate the contract immediately and seize assets to cover losses. Adrian scoffed. My credit is fine. My company is solid. Is it? Emily asked. Because this morning I bought your debt. Adrian froze. You... what? Your loans, Emily explained, her voice sounding like a judge reading a sentence. You had 3 major loans with Barclays and a high-interest credit line with Investec. They were nervous about your recent spending, the offshore transfers, the hidden accounts. They were very happy to sell that debt to a private investor for a lump sum. That investor is Vance Holdings. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. You can't do that. I own your debt, Adrian. $12 million of it. And since you just publicly halted operations and breached your service contract, you are now in default. I am calling in the full amount. Immediately. I can't pay $12 million today, Adrian stammered. I know, Emily said. Which means, as of 12:00 p.m. today, I am foreclosing on Blackwood Logistics. I'm not just firing you, Adrian. I'm taking your trucks. I'm taking your warehouses. I'm taking your office. You're bluffing, Adrian screamed. Look out the window, Emily said. Adrian dropped the phone and ran to the glass wall. Down below, in the parking lot of his office building, 3 black SUVs had pulled up. A team of people in dark suits was getting out. Leading them was a man Adrian recognized with a jolt of terror. Jonathan Greaves, the most ruthless liquidator in London. And right behind him, police officers. Julian, Adrian yelled, turning around. Fix this. Call the offshore accounts. Wire the money back. We need to pay the debt. But the office was empty. Julian was gone. Adrian looked at the door. It was slightly ajar. He ran into the hallway. Julian. He found his brother in the break room, frantically shoving documents into a shredder. But he wasn't shredding them. He was scanning them. What are you doing? Adrian demanded. Julian looked up, his face sweaty but determined. He held up a flash drive. I'm sorry, Adrian. I have a wife. I have kids. I'm not going to prison for your greed. Prison? Adrian whispered. Emily didn't just buy the debt, Julian said, his voice trembling. She sent a forensic audit team to the SFO, the Serious Fraud Office. She gave them everything. The fake invoices, the Cayman's accounts, the tax evasion schemes we used to hide your money for the divorce. She knows everything. You rat, Adrian hissed, lunging at his brother. But before he could reach him, the double doors of the hallway burst open. Adrian Blackwood, a booming voice echoed. Adrian spun around. It was the police. Stay where you are. Adrian backed up against the vending machine. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it would explode. This wasn't happening. He was the winner. He was the one who laughed while signing the papers. He was the one with the mistress and the plan. He looked at his phone, which was still clutched in his hand. The call with Emily was still connected. He put it to his ear one last time. "Emily?" he whispered, his voice broken. "Goodbye, Adrian," Emily said. "I hope the laugh was worth it." The line went dead. The downfall of Adrian Blackwood was not a slow decline. It was a sudden, violent collapse, like a building whose foundations had been dynamited. Within 48 hours of the raid on Blackwood Logistics, Adrian's life was dismantled, piece by piece. He was released on bail, posted by his frantic mother, who had to remortgage her bungalow, but he returned to a world that no longer belonged to him. First, he went to the penthouse. The concierge at the luxury building stopped him at the desk. "Mr. Blackwood," the concierge said, looking embarrassed. "I'm afraid your key fob has been deactivated." "What? I live here," Adrian shouted, still wearing the crumpled suit from 2 days ago. "The lease was in the company name," the concierge explained. "The liquidators, Greaves and Associates, have seized the property. They've changed the locks. Your personal effects have been boxed and are waiting in the loading bay." Adrian stood there, mouth agape, while residents he used to sneer at walked by, whispering. He had to walk around the back to the trash area to collect 3 cardboard boxes containing his expensive suits and watches. He tried to call a car. His Uber account was declined. His credit cards, all of them, were frozen. The freezing order Emily's lawyers had obtained was comprehensive. They argued that his assets were proceeds of crime, embezzled from the company that now belonged to her. He sat on a curb in the rain, clutching a box containing a $5,000 espresso machine he couldn't use, and called Tiffany. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service," the automated voice said. He checked Instagram. Tiffany had posted a photo an hour ago. She was on a yacht in Dubai. The caption read, "New beginnings, Dotash single life." Lessons learned. She had blocked him. With nowhere else to go, Adrian took a bus, a humiliation in itself, to his mother's small house in Croydon. For 2 weeks, he lay on the sofa in his childhood living room, watching the news. The media was having a field day. The laughing divorcee. How one signature cost a man $500 million. Fraud investigation. Widens Blackwood brothers accused of embezzlement. Julian had cut a deal. In exchange for full cooperation, he was given immunity from prosecution and a suspended sentence. He had handed over every password, every ledger, and every dirty secret Adrian had. Adrian, however, was the mastermind. The SFO was throwing the book at him. The charges piled up: fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, and money laundering. But the worst blow came not from the police, but from the legal discovery phase of the civil suit Emily filed. Adrian received a letter from Mr. Sterling. It was a copy of a document found in Silas Vance's personal safe. Adrian sat at his mother's kitchen table, reading the letter under the flickering fluorescent light. It was a handwritten note from Silas Vance, dated 1 year prior. "To my dear Emily, I know you are unhappy. I see the way he treats you. I know you stay because you think divorce is a failure, and because you think he contributes to the business. I want you to know, Adrian contributes nothing. I have been quietly subsidizing his logistics company for 5 years to keep the peace for your sake. He is not a businessman. He is a leech. When I am gone, I hope you find the strength to cut him loose. If you do, you will find you are far richer without him, in spirit and in coin." Adrian stared at the paper. Silas had known. The whole time the old man had known Adrian was a fraud. He had been propping up Blackwood Logistics secretly, just to stop Adrian from going bankrupt and stressing Emily out. Adrian realized then that he had never been the clever one. He hadn't tricked Silas. Silas had been pitying him. The rage that usually fueled Adrian turned into something colder. Despair. He had signed the divorce papers laughing, thinking he was escaping a beige wife and a boring life. In reality, he had been a parasite detaching itself from the host, only to realize the host was the only thing keeping him alive. The final twist of the knife came a month later, on the day of his plea hearing. Adrian stood in the dock at the Crown Court. He looked gaunt, his hair thinning. He wore a cheap suit bought from a charity shop. Emily was there. She sat in the public gallery, looking radiant. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't laughing. She just watched him with a calm, detached curiosity, like one watches a bug in a jar. The judge asked him how he pleaded. "Guilty," Adrian whispered. As he was led away to the cells to await sentencing, he looked back one last time. He wanted Emily to look angry. He wanted her to hate him. Hate meant he still mattered. But Emily wasn't looking at him anymore. She was checking her watch, standing up, and walking out of the courtroom to get back to running her empire. She had already forgotten him. HMP Wandsworth is not a place for men who wear Italian silk. It is a Victorian fortress of brick and stone, smelling perpetually of bleach, boiled cabbage, and damp wool. For inmate number A9322 CIK, formerly known as Adrian Blackwood, it was hell on earth. It had been 18 months since the sentencing. 18 months of sharing a 6x8 cell with a man named Baz, who snored like a chainsaw and was in for armed robbery. Adrian, once the king of the boardroom, now worked in the prison laundry, folding rough grey sheets for $12 a week. He had aged 10 years. His hair was grey and thinning, his skin sallow from the lack of sunlight. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a permanent scowl of bitterness. He spent his nights staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment in the conference room, the laughter. If he could just go back and strangle his past self, he would. One rainy Tuesday, the guard banged on his cell door. "Blackwood, legal visit." Adrian sat up. His heart jumped. Legal visit. Had his appeal finally gone through? Had Julian recanted? Maybe there was a loophole. Hope, cruel and sharp, pierced his chest. He quickly smoothed his uniform, splashed cold water on his face, and followed the guard down the long, echoing corridor. He was led to a private visitation room, usually reserved for solicitors. But when the door opened, it wasn't his court-appointed lawyer sitting there. It was Emily. She was sitting at the metal table, hands folded over a sleek black leather folder. She looked expensive. There was no other word for it. She wore a cream-colored cashmere coat, diamond stud earrings, and an air of quiet, unshakable authority. She looked like the woman Silas Vance always knew she could be. Adrian stood frozen in the doorway. "Emily." "Hello, Adrian," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was just professional. "Please, sit down." Adrian sat. He felt small. "I thought you were my lawyer." "I have your lawyer's permission to be here," Emily said. "I needed to see you in person. There is one final piece of business to conclude." "Business?" Adrian let out a dry, rasping laugh. "I have nothing left, Emily. You took the company. You took the penthouse. You took my reputation. What else is there? My kidney?" Emily opened the leather folder. She slid a single document across the table. It was a property deed transfer. "The house in Surrey," Emily said. Adrian frowned. He remembered the house, the money pit, a crumbling Victorian manor with a leaking roof and dry rot. He had laughed when he generously let her keep it in the divorce settlement, thinking it would bankrupt her with repair costs. "What about it?" Adrian sneered. "Finally realized it's a burden? Want to give it back?" "No thanks. I live here now, rent-free." "I sold it, Adrian," Emily said softly. "Good for you," he spat. "Who was the idiot who bought it? Did you get 100 grand? Maybe 2? Emily watched him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "Do you remember, Adrian, about 5 years ago, when the council sent those letters about the proposed high-speed rail expansion? You threw them in the bin. You said, 'I don't read junk mail.'" Adrian blinked. Vague memories of letters with council logos surfaced. "So? If you had read them," Emily said, "you would have known that the proposed route went directly through the back 10 acres of the Surrey estate. The government needed the land. But they didn't just need the land. They needed the shale deposit underneath it for the tunnel foundations." Adrian felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. "What are you saying?" "I didn't sell the house as a residence, Adrian. I sold the land to the National Infrastructure Commission. The deal closed yesterday." She pulled a photocopy of a check from the folder and placed it on top of the deed. Adrian looked at the numbers. He squinted. He blinked. 500,000. 24 million. "The house you left me as a joke," Emily said, "was sitting on a gold mine. Literally. And because you were so desperate to rush the divorce, so desperate to keep your hidden assets, which turned out to be illegal, you signed over all rights to this property. It was the only asset that was 100% clean and 100% valuable." Adrian stared at the check. The numbers seemed to dance, mocking him. 24 million pounds. That was more than he had ever stolen, more than he had ever hidden, and he had given it to her. He had insisted she take it. He looked up at Emily, his eyes burning with tears. "Why?" he whispered. "Why tell me this? You have the money. You won. Why come here and show me?" "Because I needed you to know one thing," Emily said, leaning forward. "I didn't win because I was ruthless, Adrian. I didn't win because I was greedy. I won because I paid attention. I read the will. I read the letters. I listened to my uncle." She stood up, buttoning her coat. "You spent your whole life trying to be the smartest person in the room, Adrian. But you never listened to anyone but yourself. And that is why you are in here, and I am out there." "Emily, please," Adrian begged, his voice cracking. He reached out a hand, but the guard stepped forward. "Please, put some money in my commissary account, just a few thousand, for old times' sake. I can't live like this. The food, the cold." Emily looked at his hand, the hand that had signed the divorce papers while laughing. "I'm sorry, Adrian," she said, "but my financial advisors have advised me against investing in high-risk, low-return assets. Goodbye." She turned and walked out. The heavy steel door clanged shut, leaving Adrian alone with the photocopy of the check. He stared at it until the lights went out. 5 years later, the Maritime Industry magazine, the Shipping News, featured a cover story. "The Queen of the Sea. How Emily Vance doubled the Vance shipping empire." Emily sat in her office in the Shard, the very building where Adrian had planned to celebrate his freedom lunch. She was reading the article with a faint smile. The company was unrecognizable. Under her leadership, Vance Shipping had pivoted to green energy transport. They were the leaders in moving wind turbine components and hydrogen fuel cells. The stock price had tripled. She wasn't just rich, she was respected. She had established the Silas Vance Foundation, which provided scholarships for underprivileged students to study logistics and maritime law. Her intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Vance," her assistant said, "there is a woman in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she knows you. A Ms. Tiffany Miller?" Emily paused. She hadn't heard that name in years. "Send her up," Emily said. A few minutes later, Tiffany walked in. She looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by fast-fashion knockoffs. She looked tired. The spark of arrogant youth had faded, replaced by the hard edge of someone who had bounced from one failed relationship to another. Tiffany looked around the expansive office, her eyes wide with envy. "Hello, Tiffany," Emily said, not rising from her chair. "Hi, Emily," Tiffany said, trying to sound casual but failing. "Long time. You look amazing." "What can I do for you?" Emily asked, cutting to the chase. Tiffany shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we have history, but I was a victim too. Adrian lied to me. He told me he had the money. I wasted my best years on him." And, well, I'm writing a book," Tiffany said, gaining a little confidence. "About the scandal, the laughing divorce. I have publishers interested, but I thought maybe you wouldn't want everything dragged up again. The details, the embarrassment." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Are you blackmailing me, Tiffany?" "I'm offering you a chance to buy the rights," Tiffany said quickly. "For a fee, say $500,000, to keep your privacy." Emily laughed. It was a genuine, warm laugh, so different from the barking laugh Adrian used to have. She pressed a button on her desk. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. It showed the Vance Media Group homepage. "Tiffany," Emily said, "I bought the publishing house you're talking to last week. I also own the tabloid you tried to sell your story to yesterday. They already sent me your draft. It's poorly written, by the way." Tiffany's face went pale. You own them?" "I own a lot of things," Emily said. "And I don't pay for silence. I pay for the truth. Go ahead and publish your book on a blog if you want. No one will care. You're a footnote in my story, Tiffany. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're a main character." Emily turned back to her computer. "Security will escort you out." Tiffany stood there for a moment, mouth open, realizing she was completely outmatched. She turned and fled the office. Emily watched her go, then looked out the window at the London skyline. The city was grey, but the future looked bright. She picked up a framed photograph on her desk. It was an old picture of her Uncle Silas, smiling on his boat. "We did it, Uncle," she whispered. Somewhere in South London, in a halfway house for paroled inmates, Adrian Blackwood was scrubbing dishes in a greasy spoon diner. He looked up at the TV mounted in the corner. It was a news segment about the businesswoman of the year. He saw Emily's face. She was cutting a ribbon on a new ship. The ship was named the Silas. Adrian stopped scrubbing. He looked at his soapy hands. He looked at the woman on the screen who used to be his wife, the woman he called beige, the woman he thought was weak. He realized then that he had signed his own fate that day. He hadn't just signed divorce papers. He had signed away the best thing that ever happened to him. "Order up!" the cook yelled, slapping a bell. Adrian flinched. "Yes, boss," he muttered, turning back to the sink. He wasn't laughing anymore. And that is the story of Adrian Blackwood, the man who thought he could outsmart karma, only to find out that karma had a better lawyer. It's a brutal reminder that arrogance is a loan you eventually have to pay back with interest. Adrian was so focused on the quick win, so focused on the greed and the mistress, that he forgot the most important rule of business and life. Read the fine print and never underestimate the person you're betraying. What do you think? Did Adrian deserve his fate, or was Emily's revenge too harsh? I want to hear your opinion in the comments below, especially about the twist with the Money Pit house. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.